So some of my favorite content to watch on the internet is like individual talking head podcast content. So things like Rich Lewis, Thorin, Monty's old videos that he used to do were great. Recently, I've been watching JLXP, which is Jat from the LCS's sort of own kind of singular podcast thing. And I've always liked the idea of doing similar content for myself. I actually love the idea of being on a podcast and having my own podcast, but the problem is I am too afraid to ask anybody to do it with me. So I figured that I would try and do my own sort of on my own, talking, not like a super cut up edited video style thing, and we're gonna see how it goes. So this is episode 1. Welcome. I hope you guys are ready. Basically my idea with this is I'm gonna film it on Mondays, so right after VCT has been done for the weekend, and the idea is that I can follow along with whatever's going on during the week, and specifically during the weekend, and then we can discuss a number of those topics together when we get here. Today I have picked out my topics. I know what we're going to be talking about, and I want to start off with the new 100 Thieves roster. And I feel like I've spoken quite a lot about the 100 Thieves roster. My last video was just about what has happened with 100 Thieves. I did a video about 100 Thieves when they announced Baby J and Keloqz to be joining the roster as well. So I don't want to oversaturate my content with 100 Thieves too much, but it is way too relevant right now to skip out. This week we got to see the first showing of the new 100 Thieves roster, which now includes JC Stani and Bang instead of those two players that I just mentioned. A lot of people were very interested to see how this was going to go, especially as not only does it involve new players joining the roster, but it also involves some role swaps actually occurring within the roster. Because Keloqz was being the IGL for the team before, they had to have a new IGL. That's been handed off to Ethan. And then the actual roles within the team have changed. So for example, previously we would have almost always seen Hiko playing on Sova, that kind of role. That's now been handed over. He's playing, we saw him playing things like Viper, for example, this weekend in their game against LG. But the first that we saw of them was actually in the grand finals of the so-called Mickey Mouse tournament that Knights put on against TSM. Also pretty important to see how TSM were doing, just given the fact that I think that they had sort of let down some expectations during the qualifiers for VCT NA. And I think it was TSM, if I'm not mistaken, who actually put out and tweeted afterwards, not from the main account, I think it was someone who is involved with the roster, saying, we are now going to play in as many unofficials as possible. We're going to play in as many third-party tournaments as possible. We're going to use that to get reps and practice. And I really like that attitude, that they don't see themselves as too good to be playing there. So that was the grand finals of their tournament, which 100 Thieves lost. But it was the first time that we actually got to see this roster in action. So it was kind of cool to see what was going on there, because some of their performance previously was just uninspiring. There were times where they seemed lost. It just didn't seem super coordinated. As I said, I did a whole video about that. I think at first in this game against TSM, they looked very good at being able to exploit TSM's slowness. TSM looked really slow, very patient, not necessarily chomping at the bit to be making engages, and 100 Thieves were very good at playing against that, and especially using space against TSM. So we saw a lot of, for example, Bang and Hiko would go on these huge flanks to go and punish TSM when they were in certain parts of the map and have left other parts open. And I think that there were times when TSM's patience worked in their favor. For example, when you look at the Icebox map that they both played on, especially on the A side, 100 Thieves, for example, would have a Lear to play with, which they could use for an engagement onto that site. But TSM were very good at not being drawn out of their positions. For example, that they would be holding on Heaven, where you might have Wardell playing on Chamber, and then they would just kind of sit tight and force 100 Thieves to kind of come into the big mashy spike plates that was their defense. So there were times where it worked and times where it didn't work. 100 Thieves also went on to play LG yesterday on Sunday, which was also kind of a crazy game, because I think the natural assumption would have been like LG, not necessarily a team that we expect to be as good. They actually ended up winning the series. 100 Thieves once again lost, and admittedly those games were quite close. You have a look at these score lines and none of them are like miserable, but it's still not good enough. Now that said, I'm a big proponent of this idea that, okay, we can't expect too much from a brand new roster. It just plays into that wider holistic story of why are you having a brand new roster in the middle of a season? 100 Thieves now have a really difficult route into Masters. Sideshow was talking about it on the desk yesterday, and it was something like 100 Thieves have to win their next 2 games and then also hope that LG beat XSET, and that is the bare minimum requirement for them to actually qualify for Masters 1. So already part of their qualification, requirement is out of their own hands. And yeah, it's going to take time for the team to get to a spot where they're fully synergized, but still, they're not putting the scores on the board as of yet. And in this game against LG, there were definitely some notable things. I think that for me, we saw where the weak spots of Asuna were. Now, that's not to say Asuna played poorly, but I think you compare his Raze play to Mada, who was playing Raze on the other side, and you see where that difference was. Asuna, I think, is incredibly comfortable and wonderful and amazing on Jet. And actually, in the final map of the series, we did get to see him back on Jet, and you could see where that comfort was. But compared to Mada, I mean, Mada was just so utility heavy playing Raze. His use of satchels, oh my god, like, the dude uses satchels not just for mobility, but really aggressively, which is something that Asuna just couldn't respond with his own playstyle. And they were very good at being able to pick off Asuna because it clearly wasn't as comfortable a role for him. Now, that's not a problem that's going to be, last forever. It's just something to note. I thought it was very interesting to see Ethan and JC Stani switch around who was playing Chamber. Both of them looked pretty solid to me. I thought their use of teleport placement, for example, was very good. That's something I've been looking out for quite a lot while watching teams play Chamber, is where they want to be using their teleports and what their preference is for, the angles that they're looking to take. Both of them look pretty solid, and I am always impressed by a team that can switch around who is playing which agents or characters, whatever esport it is, because I think it shows flexibility. And yes, 100 Thieves are getting used to these new roles, and you are going to see that anyway, but I think if it's something that they can build on, then that flexibility is something that will be a huge virtue to them and a massive advantage to them in the future as they start to warm up together as a team. 100 Thieves definitely looked pretty scrappy in a number of their post plants or even just late rounds. It was something that I think the analyst desk and many people expected because, again, they're still building that coordination. And when you have players like Bang and JC Stani, simply when you compare their natural inclination with their playstyles and the way that they like to play, it lends itself more to that kind of thing. I mean, Bang especially, I feel kind of like bad saying this because Sideshow never shut up using the word proactive to describe him, but it is so true. I mean, go back to what I was talking about in the game against TSM, constantly looking for those flanks being supported by Hiko. Bang will not leave you alone. He just won't. And I really enjoyed the way that he played KO particularly, and Breach, So KO was on Breeze, which was map number 3. Breach was on Fracture, which was map number 2. I thought that he was an excellent example of a supportive initiator on those two things, and it really kind of showed off a proactivity in a slightly different way. There was also a very big difference in how Bang was playing KO on Breeze compared to how Marder was playing KO on Breeze, and I felt like Bang was playing it way more in a team supportive way, whereas Marder you would oftentimes see playing a little bit more individualistically. Not saying there's a right or a wrong, but they're just examples of different kind of play styles. It's something that I remember talking about quite a bit about Zeppa on C9, who to me was a really excellent example of a team-oriented, supportive KO. Whereas prior to that, as teams have been starting to get used to playing KO a bit more, you saw way more of that individualistic style. I did take the piss out of 100T's a little bit on my Twitter after they had that loss, but realistically, a lot of those scorelines were quite close. I mentioned it before, and so I do see good things in the future of 100Th's. I don't think that this is a complete disaster. I think it might be a disaster for their stage 1. I don't even think they're going to Masters would be the best idea for them. Now, obviously, they have a vested interest in going. They all want to compete there, and they all want to... The org wants, you know, to get there. That's the whole point. You want a world-class team. But I think that maybe I'd be saying different if this had been the roster that they'd started the stage with. But the fact is, it isn't. So they're starting from 0 again in the middle of a stage. I think you kind of write off stage 1 for 100Th's, come back into stage 2, assuming that they haven't fucking gotten rid of 2 of their players and have brought in a new roster again. There are a lot of things that they can build on that I think will probably end up pretty good for them in the long run. But we've actually got to wait for the long run to be up before we can see whether I'm right. The other team that I really wanted to talk about from NA, or game, I should say, that I really wanted to talk about from NA was the OpTic versus Sentinels game. I mean, this was a pretty big game because the whole idea was it was going to set a lot of the expectations for both of these teams. You know, OpTic, previously Envy, were arguably one of, if not the highest performing... no, one of. I don't think it's fair to say the, because they were the highest performing NA team at Masters 3, but they weren't at Masters 2 nor at Champions, so that's not fair. But they took a lot of people's attention. You know, a lot of people were very fond of them. They played exceptionally well throughout the course of especially the latter half of 2021. Meanwhile, Sentinels have had this ongoing story where they obliterated everyone on the first half of 2021 and then started to fall off in the latter half. And one of the big changes that we saw them make was bringing in a coach, Raucus from FaZe Clan. I personally was aware of him as a Houston Outlaws player back from the Overwatch days. And he was meant to be providing extra support specifically for Shazam, who previously had been kind of doubling up as a coach for the team. They very famously didn't have like an actual head coach. They just sort of did their own thing. Now, when this game began, everyone was still under the impression that Raucus was the coach for this team. So we're going to enter into the first map, assuming that to be the case. First map was their own map pick. It was Bind. And Sentinels lost it. 13-2. 13-2! That is, we talk about 100Th's and the fact that they've lost a ton of their games recently, but the scorelines haven't really been that bad. There's been a lot of overtime games, or maybe like a 13-10, you know what I mean? But Sentinels losing 13-2 on their map pick against OpTic. They are supposed to be cementing themselves and showing everybody that they can be the same Sentinels that we knew that they were last year, and that is not a good way to set that precedent. So, what the hell was happening? I think that Sentinels showed a lot of the same bad habits in this game that we saw last year, or that became very clear were problems for them last year. And that is that they are an incredibly fluid team, and they are not super utility dependent, and they kind of just will push when they want to push, they'll rush when they want to rush, and they'll brute force when they want to brute force. And the fact is, this is one of the most mechanically skilled teams. And I think the people on Reddit who are saying maybe 10s is the problem, I'm not quite sure that's true. Because 10s, we can't take away from him the fact that he is still 10s. He still has like the aim of a god, the mechanical skill of a god. But what became apparent towards the end of 2021 is that that is not good enough anymore. And as other teams started to develop their depth of knowledge of the game, they could outplay Sentinels regardless of their mechanical skill. And that's the big problem that Sentinels, and that I spoke about Sentinels around Champs time. Because it just seemed that Sentinels were lacking dimension in what they were doing. They didn't have a ton of set plays. They didn't have a ton of real, like, strategical approaches to a lot of what they were doing. They were kind of just doing what they were doing. And Shazam, I still think, seems like a great IGL, but he's a great IGL who's working with very little foundation. He's just kind of going in and deciding what's going to happen as it happens. And I just don't think that's good enough to stand up to a lot of these teams who, you know, their knowledge of Valorant, their understanding of Valorant is not reflective of what it was this time last year. And especially against OpTic, who proved themselves in this series to be so good with utility usage and utility coordination, it's not gonna fly. Now, the thing is this started to arouse a lot of questions from the community while they were watching this blind game, being like, why are Sentinels playing like this? This is not normal. This is very, you know, like, but not in a good way, in a bad way. And then those questions were in fact answered after that first map, when Raucus comes out of fucking nowhere with this tweet saying, by the way, I'm no longer the head coach for Sentinels. I've left. He's back on FaZe as a sub, I believe, but is you know, LFT essentially, like he wants to be a player. Now, I, along with a lot of people, do wonder why this is when he decided to announce it. Obviously, sure, there was a lot of jokes about, yeah, like, raking the impressions, dude, like, you get that. But it did just kind of feel like an LS situation that was just, like, translated over from League of Legends and into Valorant. A little bit different, because it doesn't seem like it was Sentinels as an org who were firing or letting go of Raucus. It seems like it was a personal decision. Now, regardless of what it is that Raucus does now, or whether or not he enjoyed his time as a coach, or felt that he had found success as his time as a coach for Sentinels, the question is, why don't Sentinels have a replacement? Now, I can only speculate that with a team that has been operating the way that Sentinels have for so long, it's probably quite hard to figure out if there's someone who you really trust to take that mantle. It has been Shazam's baby. They have all contributed to it, and to hand that power and those reins over to someone else, I can imagine that it's probably quite, you don't just want to pick like some random dude, right? Like you specifically want to vet whoever it is who could be coming in, so that they share your vision. So a lot of people saying like, oh, you know, if 100T's or Sentinels had MC, and MC has been spoken about quite a lot this week, just because the guard's performance has been so impressive. But I think I agree with what I saw a lot of people saying, is that Sentinels do look like they need a coach. They need to have that more structure there, and they need to find a way for that to work with the way that they want to be giving calls in game, and still having the flexibility and the fluidity that they have always played with. Because at this point, I don't think not having a coach is good enough. And it just it's just such a shame because you see these amazing moments from Sentinels. I mean, Sick and Shazam had some really great coordinated moments. Obviously, Tens is always going to pop off. Dapper, like one of the best Sentinels in the world, was formerly spoken about as the best Sentinel in the world. And then we had someone like Nats just come in and like a bull in a china shop and completely destroy that idea. You have such good potential here. It just seems like that it's not being unlocked how it should be. And this is a very, very, like, sad game, I think, for Sentinels, because we shouldn't be seeing these players come out with these kinds of results. You know, and OpTic, we have to give credit to, they just looked really good. Their utility usage, I mentioned before, phenomenal, incredibly coordinated, and look, I am unashamed to say that I am a huge it hurts me to say I'm a huge OpTic fan, because ever since I first got into esports, I've been an Envy girl. You know, I supported Envy in Overwatch, I supported Envy in Call of Duty. Any game that I watch that has Envy in it, I am likely to deviate towards them. And now I have to say I'm an OpTic fan. That doesn't work with me. But no, this team in Valorant, I am a very big fan of. I've been a really big fan of since the lead up to Masters Berlin. And so to see them play as well as they played in this game was really encouraging, because Envy, for those who can, you know, remember, didn't do that great at Champions. They didn't get out of groups, really under-delivered, and I think a lot of people had expectations for them that were just miles above what they actually managed to achieve. It's very clear they needed to come away from that tournament and do some work, and it seems that that work has definitely been done. They have been really, really putting their heads down with that, and so the kind of play that we saw from them was just sublime. It was so good to watch. And one of the things that Bala said on the desk, for example, was that on Icebox A in NA, a lot of times you will see this brute force style, and the way that Envy were using utility to actually open up that site was just wonderful to watch. And personally, I was a big fan of how they combined their KO, their Sova, and their Sage all together, work together. Oh, I just love it. I am such a sucker for teams who can use utility well, and I've never been someone who is going to be really taken by, like, the fragger. You know, I know a lot of people will talk about, you know, gunners and fraggers and, like, the jet players and be like, wow, they're the best player in the world. And I'm just like, for me, that has never been the thing that has really, really interested me. I have always been really interested in, like, utility usage. So, I mean, that's what, made me love, it's what made me love Envy last year, because I liked the way they played, but it's what made me love C9 as well in Valorant. It's why in Rainbow Six my favorite player is a hard support. I just find that so exciting. So to see a team that I love and a team that needed improvement actually show so well how that can be done is great. I think it just really highlighted a lot of Sentinel's flaws right now. So, and I mean, OpTic had things that they needed to fix. For example, on Icebox again, they had a lot of very slow rotates with Ye. Ye was playing on Chamber, if I remember correctly, for that game, and it meant that oftentimes in late round or even post-plant situations over on the A side, it was 4 players against however many OpTic had, and he wasn't necessarily part of those fights. So I think they need to be a bit quicker, a bit hastier with some of those decisions. But conversely, you had someone like Victor, who was very good at rotating, and very fast at rotating, was always where he needed to be. So these are just small nitpicks that can absolutely be fixed by VOD review, and I don't know, like, one scrim, cool, we got it. So I don't know, maybe I'm reducing that a little bit, but I am not worried for OpTic with the mistakes they were showing. With Sentinels, it still seems a bit systemic. Now, those were the main games from NA that I wanted to talk about and the main topics from of those teams. But I think we also have to mention something that happened a little bit earlier in the week, and that is Mixwell replacing Keloqz on G2 once again. Now, if you follow EU, or I guess read Reddit, you probably don't even need to be a huge EU fan to even be aware that G2 have done this flip-flop with Mixwell and Keloqz quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. And it was understandable the first time. Second time was like, okay, it's become a bit of a meme. And I think the good thing that we can take from this is that this was actually like, we're letting Keloqz go. This was not oh, well, we want Mixwell back. I don't remember what the whole fucking thing was between these two, whether it was that they didn't get on. It was like someone didn't like playing with someone, and to be honest, I just don't care about team drama. But, I mean, the things that these two players bring to the team are different. So you do see a very different play from G2 dependent on who is there. And Keloqz is undeniably an incredibly mechanically skilled player and will bring a ton of value to any team that he is on, including G2. So I'm glad they let him go. A lot of people were saying, Keloqz, go to NA, which, yeah, would have been cool, I suppose, but he's actually found a new home on Heretics. And I was reading online some people being like, oh my god, why has he gone there? Like, it's a curse. And it just reminded me of when Reckless announced he was going to K-Corp. And a lot of people were wondering where Reckless was going to go for 2022. And he says, I'm not in the LEC anymore. I'm going to the LFL. And a lot of people were like, the fuck? It's not quite that extreme with Keloqz, of course. But seeing how he'll do on Heretics will be pretty interesting. You know, they've been a decent team, but I don't think at any point have been like a super notable team. And there are many people who are arguing that Keloqz deserves better. It's probably quite hard to be picked up mid-season anyway. You know, unless you're looking to join 100T's, of course, but it's probably quite hard to be picked up mid-season anyway. I mean, I won't pretend to know the ins and outs of it, but the way I like to see things in esports is I'm not going to argue with what has been put in front of me. I'm just going to like analyze and actually observe what is in front of me. And what's in front of me right now is Keloqz is on Heretics, and I'll be very interested to see how he does on that team, as well as seeing how G2 perform with Mixwell back in the roster. Back in the active roster, I should say. The last thing as well, just a little bit of a meme, I guess, was talking about this night's tournament. I mentioned it earlier because 100T's played in it. The whole thing with their 13-year-old producer, I mean, the topic has kind of been put to bed now on social media, but the whole thing was bizarre. And I don't really want to dig up skeletons or anything. Like, I don't want to be causing anything that's already been kind of concluded. But I just wanted to say the whole thing was very funny. I think that if you are doing an official tournament of any kind, you should probably vet the people that you're hiring. And I get it. It's like, you want to props to the kid. You know, shoot your fucking shot. Shoot your fucking shot. Kid did that. Bravo to him. Like, I totally think that I would have done the same thing if I were him. And who knows, maybe he'll be producing champions 8 years down the line. I don't know. Anyway, those were the main topics that I wanted to talk about today. Let me know what you guys thought of this. I'm hoping, as I said, to do this every Monday, have it in this kind of podcast style. Maybe I'm considering doing it like where I upload on Spotify or like whatever the hell. So if that's something people would be interested in, please let me know, because I don't want to pay for that if only 3 people are going to listen to it, you know. Which actually brings me on to another thing. I have been playing with the idea of maybe opening a Patreon with very cheap tiers that basically just give some support for content creation. And yeah, I mean, so if people have any ideas or would be interested in that, also please let me know, because like I don't want to, I feel weird asking for money from people if people don't want to support that, or if they feel like I can't give the right stuff in return. But it is definitely something I'm thinking about. So watch this space. Other than that, that is everything for the first episode of Bombshell. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I definitely had fun talking about it. I've been enjoying making notes all week. I mean, yeah, if I do end up putting this on Spotify and you're listening to this, you're not gonna be able to see what I'm doing right now, but I have made so many notes this week, specifically so that I can talk about what is going on. And I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video, which will be before the next episode of this, and I will also see you in the next episode of Bombshell. Goodbye.